Nashville Predators fans are thrilled to have Steven Stamkos coming to Smashville, but how has the news gone over in Tampa Bay? And what can Preds fans expect from the veteran on and off the ice? Today, we are joined by Diandra Loux, site editor and reporter covering the Tampa Bay Lightning for the Hockey News, to take a deeper dive into the Stamkos situation.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Predators podcast, and thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to kick off this episode with a hello to our Locked On Pred heads. Those are our everyday listeners who tune in each weekday to talk Nashville Predators hockey with us. We appreciate your support, and we love that we get to spend a little bit of your day with you. I'm Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer with Penalty Box Radio, and today I am joined by great friend and incredible reporter Diandra Loux. Diandra is the site editor and reporter covering the Tampa Bay Lightning for the Hockey News. Diandra's been covering the team in Tampa Bay for the last 5 years through her writing, through radio and on-air broadcasts. Today, she joins us to answer all of our questions about Tampa Bay's decision not to sign Steven Stamkos. She's going to prime Nashville Predators fans for office hours, and she shares what she expects when Steven Stamkos returns to Tampa Bay in October as a Nashville Predator. Before we dive into our conversation with Diandra, do want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sportsin' like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, Diandra, we are here to talk the big topic in Nashville. I am pretty sure it's also the big topic still in Tampa Bay. Here to talk about Steven Stamkos leaving the Lightning, coming to the Nashville Predators. Now, I want you to understand what July 1st was like here in Nashville. And when I tell you that there was almost this citywide visceral reaction to the announcement that Steven Stamkos was coming here, I'm only slightly exaggerating, because there had been rumors, but nobody really thought that it could happen. And when it was announced that he was signing with the Predators, it has been the topic since July 1st. But I'd love to get your perspective. What was July 1st like when the news broke that Steven Stamkos was no longer going to be with the Tampa Bay Lightning?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. Finally, I'm excited to finally be here. So I would say July 1st was probably a different day in Tampa than it was in Nashville.
Different vibes there.
Yeah, two totally different vibes. And, I've talked about this a lot. It's been a little over a week now since it happened. So things have, I wouldn't say settled down. It's still very much, the topic of conversation, but yeah, I mean, I guess similar to what Stamkos said, I kind of just always assumed a deal would get done. I just thought in my head, there's no way that you could let Steven Stamkos go. You couldn't let him walk from your team. He's such an asset. And, being that I'm in there, I don't know, it feels like almost every day, covering the team during the season, I see on a day-to-day basis just the effect that he had in the locker room, on the players. He kind of just set the culture. It's hard for me to explain, but you'll see once you're in there and you're covering him. But, he really set the standard. And I think that the team kind of took on that identity. Really, I was talking to a friend that works in the business when it happened, because I was honestly in shock, even though the few days leading up to it, I kind of had an idea that was what was going to happen. But it just kind of came out. I said, I don't know what they're going to do. Steven Stamkos is the logo. And it's because, when you walk around Amalie Arena and you see the lightning bolt, you just think Steven Stamkos. So
yes,
definitely a very opposite day from what you guys had in Nashville. I think all of us are, we were kind of in mourning. It was a tough week for sure. And for me, on two different levels, right? On a professional level, because I'm really going to miss covering him and covering his leadership and just watching him interact with the fans and the kids. There's so many kids that love him, and you guys are going to see that too. And then just, on a personal level, I grew up in Florida. The reason why I wanted to cover hockey was because of the Lightning. And obviously Stamkos, has a big impact on that. So, I was kind of feeling it too. I think people don't realize that reporters also kind of go through it as well.
Yeah. When do you feel like you knew that it wasn't going to happen? Because of course there was conversation before this past season started that a deal didn't get done. And so there was sort of this lingering wonder, but when do you really feel like it became clear, oh my gosh, this could happen. We really could lose Steven Stamkos.
Yeah, I think it was Saturday. When they cleared all of the cap space, when Julian cleared the cap space, he traded Sergachev. And, you hate to see a player like Sergachev go, but I thought there's no doubt in my mind that they're doing this. I'm like, okay, they're gonna, counter Stamkos and figure out how to make it work. And then when we got on a press conference with Julian that afternoon, he was asked, now that you've cleared that space, did you increase your offer to Stamkos? And he said no. So to me, I think I got off that press conference and my mind was just, it was just kind of obvious. Like there was no intention really to keep him. And I think similar to what Stammer said on his press conference for his media availability, or actually I think it was when he was on Sportsnet, looking back, the writing was on the wall when you go back to training camp of last year and kind of throughout the season. And we had asked Julian about it a few times. And I don't know, it's one of those things where you look back on it and you're like, if I really would have paid attention to the words, I would have known there was probably never the intention to sign Stamkos. And it wouldn't have mattered what he did. It was just, they made that decision and that's kind of what it was.
We've heard people talk about, sort of floating numbers out there about what, Steven Stamkos, what was offered to him, maybe what he was bringing to the table. You were on the media call with Stamkos that I was as well when it was announced he was coming to Nashville. And one thing that he said, and I believe it was in that call and not on Sportsnet, but he said, I felt like I was coming to the table, but I was the only one making concessions. Do you feel like probably that was accurate?
Oh yeah, no, that was, first of all, Stammer is a very honest guy. Like he has no reason to sugarcoat, fluff anything up. And you'll see that too. He's just very just an honest dude. But yeah, no, I'd been hearing throughout the week kind of what the Lightning were offering him and kind of what he wanted. And, he was going to go way below market value to stay in Tampa. And, like I told you before we hopped on here, I spoke with him right before the playoffs started. It was like a couple days before they went for game 1 of the playoffs against the Panthers. And, I sat down and I talked to him about how much he loved Tampa and, how much he loved the fans and how much he wanted to stay. And, you could just see it on his face. Like he was just so excited to talk about it. And so I knew he would take a lot less. I had heard the Lightning have offered him anywhere from 3 to 3.5 over like an 8-year span and maybe a couple different structured ways, but it was still coming down to 3 to 3.5. I heard Stammer wanted like 5, but was willing to go for less. So, that just shows how much he wanted to stay and how much the Lightning weren't willing to budge.
Well, and Nashville signed him 4 years, $8 million. And I'll be honest with you, $8 million is a number that makes fans in Nashville twitchy because they signed Ryan Johansson to an $8 million deal. That didn't pan out. They signed Matt Duchene to an $8 million deal. That didn't pan out. And so we've always kind of joked, like, whatever you do, don't sign that specific number because it's a trigger. But I will tell you, there was no one flinching at $8 million for Steven Stamkos because that is, that is what he's worth. He's worth $8 million a year at least, So when we heard the numbers too coming out of Tampa Bay, they seemed very surprising for us as well. What was your read as somebody who has covered Steven Stamkos? What was your read as you watched him in the press conference? as you listen to him on Sportsnet, kind of what was your read about how he was doing with this just crazy situation?
Yeah, well, first of all, he's the most professional, genuine guy. Like, I knew that there was no way he was going to waver on anything. Like, he was just going to be himself. And he's really good at holding it together. And he did it the entire season, knowing that they didn't approach him last summer on an extension, which they do for all of their players. And he just never let it affect him all year. So I knew when he got on the press conferences that regardless of what happened, he was going to keep it really professional. I will say, you know, I was at Emily and we took that press conference. I had my laptop in the media room. So like everybody was standing around me watching him on the press conference. It was really surreal because the last time I was in the media room, Stamkos was there. So it was very surreal to see. But again, you guys you're gonna see what a professional he is. And you know, anything that's going on behind closed doors, he will never, ever, he's never gonna put anybody down. He's never gonna disclose it. And he's just gonna always keep it genuine and professional. But I have to say it was very surreal to see him with a different team. It just didn't seem right at all.
It's even one of those things that's still, even to us here, and I had told you this before we popped on, but I was looking up some stats, and to see his picture on the NHL stats page with gold background Nashville Predators, it's shocking to us. And look,
Yeah.
Nashville is beyond thrilled about the signing, but it is shocking because this is one of those players you always expect to see in blue and white. You just always expected that he would be with the Tampa Bay Lightning. One of the things too that I will say is I was so impressed, and you're talking about this is just who he is, and I think this will be really great for Nashville to get to know him. But you want to
Mhm.
talk about a situation where like the petty in me would want to like slash and burn, baby. Like, I would I was so impressed with, like you said, he was so professional. He was very
Yeah.
honest, and as somebody in Nashville, did not feel at all slighted by his honesty about how he felt about having to leave Tampa Bay. And I think people in Nashville really respect that he loved where he was and he was all in there. And that's a hard line to walk when, you know, you've been through what he's been through, but you also want to look forward. Class act, total class act in that call.
Yeah, I think, and that's just like genuinely who he is, where maybe some of us would be inclined to
Oh,
to like
that's
you
me
said,
too.
be a little petty, you know? I
Yeah.
definitely
Oh,
had my moments in this past week where I want to be a little petty, but you know, again, like that's just genuinely who he is. Like he just communicated how he was feeling. This is how I feel. Everyone knows this is how I feel, but I also want to be respectful to my new team. And I think you're going to see that. Like you and I talked about this, but you know, as much as he wanted to stay in Tampa, and I'm sure this is a very difficult time for him right now, you got to think about, you know, off the ice, like his family is rooted here and he's,
yes.
you know, really involved in the community. And you know, he has a house and like all of these things that are separate from hockey that he has to distance himself from. So there's probably a lot going on, but he'll be all in. Like once he gets to Nashville and that's his team, like he's gonna dig his heels in. And you know, he's always just gonna be the same guy. He's on a different level. Stamkos is on a different level than other players. And I think that's why it's so difficult to see him go for a lot of Lightning fans that are heartbroken and not doing well with this at all.
Of course, all hockey fans know what a talent Steven Stamkos is. But coming up, Deandra's going to share the one moment in games that's going to have Predators fans leaning in. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. That's the formula for winning championships. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, LED kits, and more. Whether you are into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. What have been the talking points from the front office, since this happened? Is it still something that they are asked about? Are they still addressing it? Have they really kind of moved on? Because, they're making moves separate from not signing Stamkos, of course, signed Jake Gensel, and, they signed Victor Hedman. Have they been asked more about it? Have they said any more about it since then?
No, I'm not going to lie. It's been a very weird time right now. Victor Hedman and Stamkos are best friends. Those guys are brothers. And, we had a press conference the next day, and it was on Hedman's extension, which was the same exact contract that Stamkos has in Nashville. And yeah, and it was, you could tell it was so difficult for Hedman to even talk about. Like, he didn't even want to touch on the subject of, him being the next captain or anything like that. So we haven't heard anything since then, I would say. And we have not heard anything since then. I think this is something that's not going to go away. And I keep telling people, I don't know if you've looked at my Twitter lately, but it's kind of a mess right now. I get it. I totally get it. Like, people are very upset, but one thing that I've been saying is, like, this story is not going away, at least on my end. Like, I'm going to cover this all the way through, because if you make a big move, like getting rid of your captain who's been there for 16 years, who was drafted by your organization, who was the best player in the playoffs for the Lightning, like by far, he showed up. Like, he was their best player, and especially down the stretch. So if you get rid of a player like that and you don't succeed, the moves that you made are not successful, that story is going to carry over. So I keep trying to tell people, like, this story is not done. The story is going to keep going. And, we haven't really heard much, but like I said, that doesn't mean anything. This story is, especially when Stamkos is back in October, and
yes. So. Yeah. Do you think the move was about cap space, or do you think it was about kind of getting younger in pivoting? Do you think it was just a mixture of both?
To be honest, it's so hard to say, because they didn't get younger. The Lightning didn't get younger. Hedman he's only a few months younger than Stamkos. So they didn't get younger, and Ryan McDonagh's older than Stammer. Right. They signed a 35-year-old. So, I don't think the story is them getting younger. I think probably if you ask Julian, he would say, we wanted to improve on 5-on-5. We wanted to improve as a defensive team. Jake Gensel is a strong two-way player, but, right. He scores 30 goals a season. Stamkos is a 40-goal scorer. So you still have to make up for those goals somewhere. So it's very hard. I'm still kind of trying to figure out, and like, Julian could obviously make another move. There's plenty of time to do so, but I'm trying to figure out this identity of this team. But it's definitely not that they were getting younger, or getting tougher. It's I think that this was something that was planned probably at least a year in advance. And kind of like what Stammer said, the writing was always on the wall, but you always have hope, and you're kind of sitting there. And Stamkos is one of those players, like, you want to be really respectful of. So we didn't really push the contract conversation too much, because he didn't want it to affect the team. And I totally respect that. Mm-hmm. Looking back, the hints were there, the signs were there, and now we're here. So
yeah, of course, everybody is familiar with Steven Stamkos. If, whether you're a fan of the Tampa Bay Lightning, if you are a hockey fan, Steven Stamkos. Mm-hmm. But just for any fans in Nashville who may not have had as much time, most of us have not watched him like you have. You've been there for all of the games. What do we need to be watching when we're talking about on-ice skill set? Like, what are the things that absolutely stand out, besides the fact that he does basically everything really, really well?
Yeah, he is. The biggest thing that you're going to see is when he scores on the power play, and we just say it's from his office. And it's like the most deadly slap shot you've ever, I mean, you could hear it. It's so loud. And we've actually asked him about it, like how he practices it and things like that. But one thing that I'm really going to miss is like when they're in a bind and they need a goal and he just scores and he shoots from his office and everybody moves out of the way because they don't want to get hit. And it just would get so loud in Emily. And there were just so many jokes. There was like running jokes about him like scoring in his office and office hours are open. And we would make up all these like weird memes and things like that. So I'm definitely gonna miss that. And I was actually thinking about during the playoffs when he jumped in front of a puck, like he literally just threw his body in front of a puck to cover the net. And it's just crazy. Like you really want a guy like that on the ice with you. And he's such a leader. And, you know, if things would kind of crumble or they were having a rough game, like he was just always that solid guy. So he's somebody you definitely want on your team. But him scoring from the office will forever be like some of my favorite. I'm going to miss, there's no stammer time anymore, like things like that.
Yes. Oh, that's so great.
Yeah. So we're definitely going to miss that. I know just all around, I can speak for everyone here in Tampa.
Well, and I will say that you just said some magic words for Nashville Predators fans because the power play has been the bane of our existence all of last season. So that was one of the things when the shock, it still hasn't really worn off, but that was one of the things when you could kind of get through the feeling of, oh my Lord, we just signed Steven Stamkos. Everybody was like, the power play, like we could actually score some goals. This could be huge.
He's gonna crush it. And it's fun too. It's fun to watch. It's fun. You know that when he gets the puck, it's like the chances of it going in are so high. You're like, I just know what this is gonna look like. I know where it's coming from, and you're just anticipating that it's gonna happen. So that's the most fun. Is like, I remember this past season, I think we were playing Boston and he scored with like 46 seconds left and it was from his office. And it was just the coolest thing. It was the loudest I had heard Emily in so long. So big games like that, he's going to come through always. And, you know, he's got a lot of experience, but also that's just kind of the guy he is, you know, it's just the player that he is.
You've touched on this, you know, a little bit earlier as we were talking, but you've covered him obviously off ice. Talk about what he brings off ice in the locker room as a leader. You know, he was captain of this team. What is he going to bring to Nashville off ice?
Yeah, I think what he brings off ice is actually more important than what he brings on the ice. And I've been saying this, like Stamkos is the kind of player that you don't base his value off of what's on a stat sheet. Like he's just not that kind of player. And, you know, there's great athletes that come and go and there's, you know, they just are, he's like the Mount Rushmore of hockey players. And I think what he brings off the ice is the best part of him, right? Like we talk about growing the game in Florida, like the game is growing in Florida and kids are wanting to play hockey here, but like he's literally the reason why they want to play hockey here, you know? So we used to have a lot of kids would come in. John Cooper works with like pediatric cancer patients and does events with them and stuff like that. So I would say almost every Saturday, if there was a home game, we would have some kids come in and every single time you would ask them who their favorite player was. And it was always Steven Stamkos. And, you know, he would get on the ice with them and work on their slap shots and stuff like that. And I remember one time we were playing Montreal. I forget, it had to be the second half of the season. It was a Saturday and I was so tired and I'm like, oh, I'm going to go to morning skate. I almost want to skip the game. It's been such a long week. And I saw two of the kids. One was he was going through chemotherapy. And he was playing on the little mini rink with his friend and he was pretending like he was Steven Stamkos. And his friend was Vasilevsky. So they said, Stammer, get ready. You know, they were imitating Vasi and Stamkos. And I'm like, you know what? This is seriously what it is all about. So I think what he does off the ice, he's done so much for our community. I mean, like you can do research on it, but it's just endless things that he's done for Tampa. So things like that are, I think, what's most important. And obviously people really respect him here and that will carry over in Nashville. You know, he's just a leader and he won't be the captain in Nashville, but you're going to see his leadership carry over. Everyone, like Stamkos is the kind of guy like players want to be, and you want to be like him as a person. He's a great person. all around. When I talk about how I wanted to be petty in the past week, I'm like, nope, don't do it.
Yeah,
It
that's
doesn't
right.
align with him. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
This is such an exciting piece for Nashville, not just obviously like you're talking about on ice, but off ice as well, because Nashville really is in this season of resetting a culture where Barry Trotz came as the general manager and, Andrew Brunette came as the head coach. And they're like, look, we need to change some of the way that the team operates off ice and just how they view this. And when we look at Steven Stamkos, it's like you can't ask for a better piece to come in and jump in with Roman Josi and Ryan O'Reilly and Luke Shen and Gus Nyquist and Philip Forsberg and UC Saros and help set that culture for these young players that are coming up. So I know that is something that was very important to Barry Trotz, not just, power play and goal scoring, but also just this is a guy who's going to change the culture. 10 years from now, these players will be doing things because that's the way Steven Stamkos did them. We're going to wrap up our discussion with Diandra in just a minute, talking about the game that will bring Stamkos back to Amalie Arena on October 28th and what she expects that reception to be like. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much and never want them to stop. But as the playoffs have wrapped up, we're going to get fewer games and the sports, they just aren't sportsing like I'd want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. Whether it's Major League Baseball or WNBA, FanDuel has all the action you want. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Here's the thing. It's going to be great to watch for 82 games of the regular season. And then let's see what happens in the postseason. But there is a lot of excitement and a lot of expectations here.
I know obviously Nashville was in the playoffs last year, but like they'll really, really have that edge just because Stammer is a playoff guy. Like he turns into a totally different human being in the playoffs. Like I saw it this season too. It was like normal Stammer, playoff Stammer, and I can't really explain it, but you'll see, because I really think Nashville is a good shot this year. And I think, emotions are a part of sports, right? It's not just analytics and like what's on the stat sheet. And, athletes need that emotional component to really push through adversity, especially in the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's the hardest trophy to win in sports. So he's going to get them going. Like he knows what it's like to win a cup. And Luke Shen, like, has obviously been there with him too, but Stammer's he's a different dude during the playoffs. You're going to see, I think Nashville's going to go really far this year.
We talked earlier off camera about this as well, but Ryan Patrick, who I absolutely have loved watching in Nashville, asked to go back to Tampa Bay. And part of the reason, it's similar to Steven Stamkos, his life is rooted in Tampa Bay. Like that's his support system. That's his family. That's where he wants to raise his kids. And mad respect for a professional athlete who values that as much as, on ice. But part of what he said is he wanted to go back and play with Victor Hedman and Steven Stamkos. And Barry Trotz made sure to make that happen because Ryan McDonagh is a total stand-up guy, and you want to do right by those players in the league. Now, Steven Stamkos is not there. What have you heard anything about that situation? And how is the team going to adjust to not having him?
Honestly, that's a great question. I think that's a whole side of it that we haven't even seen yet, is like, what is the locker room going to be like? Like, how do you overcome a hole like that? Yeah, McDonagh, we call him Mac here. You call him Ryan Patrick, we call him Mac. But
I don't call him Ryan Patrick to his face, but I do. In my heart, he's Ryan Patrick.
Yeah, no, his first presser, like once it happened. Well, kudos to Barry Trotz too, because I remember when that happened and he was explaining. I think it was Barry Trotz, actually. He had explained like why he decided to do this and why he was okay with it. I'm like, what a stand-up guy. Like that is hard to find in the league. And I thought it was just so impressive. And, we always kind of knew in Tampa that McDonagh was never supposed to leave. Like, I think I messaged you multiple times about him since we've known each other. Like, it was just something we talked about in Tampa all the time. Like, he's got to come back. He's got to come back. They just were never the same without him. They were never the same. And, I feel for him because Stamkos is his best friend. And luckily Hedman will have him here in Tampa because it's going to be a tough transition for him as well. And they can kind of do that together. But, I feel for him. I think he's probably really happy to be in Tampa, but thought it was going to be a totally different situation. And when we had the press conference with him, he said the first person he called was Stamkos, and Stamkos was on the ice with Kucherov.
Yes.
So it was just like in our minds, we're like, this is it. Like, they're all going to reunite. They're going to make a run for the cup and nostalgia 101. But, that's just not how it's going to be. And I think another person who's incredibly professional and genuine is Ryan McDonagh. So I think he'll do everything he can to help Hedman kind of through this transition. Obviously he's a leader as well. So, I feel for him though. I do. Yeah. Those guys, those three together were iconic.
Yes, I know. That was probably my second thought after the shock and awe of the signing was, oh my gosh, Ryan McDonagh wanted to be back there with these guys. I do want to ask you about the return of Steven Stamkos. That's going to be happening in October. Now, look, here, let's set the stage, because when Ryan Patrick came back, it was unbelievable. I mean, the crowd response, and he didn't play in his first game back because he had, of course, blocked a shot with his face as he does. But the response to Ryan McDonagh returning to Tampa Bay was absolutely mind-blowing. Got a key to the city. They named a day after him. What is the return? Like, how do you anticipate the return of Steven Stamkos to Amalie Arena?
Oh, it's not going to be good. I mean, he's going to get everything that he deserves, but it's not going to be, it's going to be very emotional. I hate that it's at the beginning of the season because he doesn't get any time to get situated and adjust and like really let it like sink in of what's going on. He doesn't get a lot of time. I think I can't even imagine. But again, he's so professional. I'm sure he's mentally preparing for it, and the rest of everybody else will be crying and he'll be, he'll be steady, but like kind of similar. It's going to be, if you thought Ryan McDonagh's return was big, which it was, everybody was sobbing and his family was crying and it was a huge thing, but this is going to be on a totally different level. I don't know how he's going to do it. Honestly, it's going to be hard to cover it too. Like I said, seeing him go on a professional level and also on a personal level as somebody who lives in Tampa, loves Tampa, and wanted to cover hockey because of the Lightning. Like it's going to be very difficult. I'm sure the press box is going to be packed with people, but I honestly can't even imagine him in another sweater. So it's like not even something that I'm grasping very well. It's going to be very strange, very strange.
Yeah. Diandra, I want to thank you so much for coming on, sharing your insight. You've been watching Stamkos for so long. You've talked with him, and it's been really great to get your perspective on the situation and on who he is and who Nashville is getting. So I want to thank you for that. But before we go, can you let everybody know where they can find you on social media and where they can find your work? Because you all need to be following Diandra.
Yeah. So you can find all of my work on the Hockey News. I do a lot of radio and things like that, but the Hockey News is where you can read everything. And I see my Twitter handle down here. It's Diandra_Loux. And then I have a link to my work in my bio. So like I said, my Twitter is very active right now. Follow it. You're boring.
It is not boring. Yeah, that's right. Well, we are looking forward to you coming to Nashville for some Tampa Bay Lightning games, and we'll grab a coffee or a burger. It's going to be great.
We're doing it. We'll do both.
I want to thank Diandra for joining me today to share her insight and her experience covering Steven Stamkos. While it is going to be a fun season in Nashville with the addition of Stamkos, there's going to be plenty of big storylines unfolding in Tampa Bay as well this season. So make sure that you follow Diandra on social media and check out all of her work at the Hockey News. That's going to do it for today's episode of the Locked On Predators podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We'll be back tomorrow with an all new episode. We'll see you then.